Welcome, everybody. My name is Adrian Wootton. I'm the Chief Executive of Film London, the British Film Commission, but Film London is also the parent body of Games London, and this is the London Games Festival 2021. Unfortunately, not actually live in venues because of the current circumstances, but actually what it does mean is that it gives us access to a lot more people around the world to participate and to host. And tonight is a very special example of that. We are so pleased and honoured to welcome the living legend that is John Carpenter, a really he's laughing, a really famous movie director who I've had the pleasure of meeting and interviewing about his film work before. In fact, he was the patron of a Howard Hawks season back here in London in 1997, and that masterclass about that is about to come out on a DVD extra, courtesy of Powerhouse Films, with 2 Howard Hawks films, Criminal Code and 20th Century. But we're not really here to talk about his movie work. We will touch on it. We definitely are going to do that. But this is a games festival, so we're going to talk about John's passion, his interest, his consuming, his playing of games, and his influence on games through his own work. So there's a lot to talk about, and we've also got some fantastic contributions from some other figures in the games industry who are all big fans of John's, who also want to ask him some questions. So it's going to be a varied, I think, fascinating conversation that we're going to have. So I'm going to kick off, but before I do start grilling John, I wanted to introduce and show this sizzle reel overview of John's work. So let's just see these moments from John's fabulous career as a filmmaker, from Dark Star, Assault on Precinct 13, Escape from New York, Escape from LA, Halloween, all these amazing movies that he's made. Let's see a little bit of that, and then I'll come back and we'll start talking to John.
I really don't know what the outside universe is like at all, for certain.
That's it.
Intriguing. I wish I had more time to discuss this matter.
Why don't you have more time?
Because I must detonate in 75 seconds.
No more like a millstone, a plumbing stone, by God. Damn them all.
I'm not a fool, Pliskin.
Call me Snake.
I know I'm human. And if you were all these things, then you'd just attack me right now. So some of you are still human.
Shall I tell you what I find beautiful about you?
How are you today, sir? Okay, how's it going? Fine, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Well, welcome, John. It's a real pleasure to welcome you virtually to London while you're actually sitting in your home in Los Angeles. And I hope you and your family and everybody's all safe and well despite the current circumstances.
Everybody's good here, Adrian. How are you? I'm
very well, thank you. We're all good as well. So I'm glad we're all staying safe. So I'm going to kick off. Let's talk about video games. I know you as a movie buff. I know you as a great movie director. I've talked to you endlessly about films and your love of Howard Hawks. But when did you first start playing video games? When did you first start caring about them and being interested in them?
Well, the big moment, I think, and I believe it was 1992, was I discovered Sonic the Hedgehog.
Ah, right.
The very first Sonic game. And it was unbelievable. And I started playing. I was clueless, okay? I was just completely clueless, but I was addicted from then on. And it was my son that got me into it.
Right.
Because he was playing, and he was, of course, immediately a master at it. and loved to humiliate me in any way he could.
And at that point, was it just, was it a release from your full-time career as a movie maker, making, all kinds of, because you were still making big movies at that point in the 1990s. And so was this just a kind of personal distraction rather than anything that was in any way serious?
Well, you could enter a world that you could participate in, and a fantasy world with characters that did things. And it was sensational. It was so much better than the real world. It was so much better than what was going on. And it was just a joy. I thought, man, I want to be here all the time. Why am I in this movie business crap? So,
but in terms of the movie business crap, obviously what happened, and we're going to come on to the games you're playing now, but the movie business did and has made games of your films, and but not an enormous amount of them, but The Thing, I believe, there was a Halloween game, there was even a Big Trouble in Little China game, and I'm just wondering, were you tempted at that when those were commissioned? Were you tempted, thinking, actually, I'd really like to get involved in actually helping to consult on those games, to be part of those games, or did it never occur to you at that point?
Well, the people who made The Thing game came to me, and very nicely too, and they made me a character. I got killed, of course, but they were great, and that's probably the best of the games. That's a fun game to play, but nobody tells me anything, Adrian. Nobody. They want me to go away. I may screw it up by getting involved, but I'd love to be involved. I'd love to.
I'm amazed, though, that, considering that, and we're going to hear from figures in the games industry in the not too distant future, considering how passionate and enthusiastic I've heard so many people in the games industry talk about how one or another of your films, and a lot of them talk about The Thing, and we're going to hear from somebody, but how you seem to have had a kind of, almost by osmosis, an influence over the way in which games are thought about, characters, design, atmosphere. I'm amazed that there hasn't been more of a formal effort to sort of say, would you like to write a game, John? Would you like to, would you like to retrofit to go back to one of your movies and do that? And that hasn't happened? No.
I'm a big fan of Dead Space, that game.
Oh.
And
we'll come on to that.
I met with the creators, and they were talking about how they got to where they got to. But they met with everybody else but me. They met with all the horror directors, but they didn't bother to meet with me. So it's the story of my life, Adrian. I should move to Britain. I should move to England.
But you did, because obviously another big part of your creative work is competition. As a musician, you've written the scores for lots of your films, and you have written score for games. So how did that come about?
Well, I did one piece of music for a game, and it was they wanted some music from me. So I was making a movie in Santa Fe. So they arranged for me to go outside of town in this little studio and just kind of create something. So I did. It was fun. It was easy. Everybody was nice. They just wanted some weird music from the weird director, so I provided it for them.
And I should say, you've just released earlier this year, very recently, you've released your fourth album, which is accessible everywhere, available on Spotify and all good outlets and digital places. But
That's right.
But it does, as I say, it amazes me, because I'm just, the thing I wanted to ask you is, well, you still very much are playing games, and even though you haven't had necessarily that creative interaction as much as you might have liked, and I think any games industry person watching this now, I think your phone might start to ring after this because people think John Carpenter wants to make a game with me. I'm going to, So I'd be careful what you wish for on this. But coming back to what you're playing, what are you playing right now? What's the best game you've played recently?
Well, believe it or not, I'm a fan of the Fallout games. And there was a sort of disastrous release for Fallout 76, but I took to it and I'm enjoying it. I love it. Also, the Borderlands games, I'm a huge, huge fan. Horizon Zero Dawn, I'm waiting for the sequel. Please come and let's go. And there's various others, but those are the games that I keep playing. Oh, the Assassin's Creed game. The recent one's great. It's just terrific. So.
And that just prompts me, of course, like so many big games, Assassin's Creed, the movie, why do you think, as a filmmaker, as a prestigious filmmaker, why do you think that actually so many large-scale adaptations of games have failed? What do you think the DNA problem is?
In that sense, they didn't take the movies seriously. They didn't take the game seriously. You have to take being an assassin really seriously in order for that game to work. And it was more of one-liners and Hollywood jokes, and that it just doesn't. I don't know. That's a curse. Hollywood's tried to make movies out of games. They've never really succeeded. I can't think of a great one. I just can't.
No, it's as you say. I mean, it's a litany of actually missed opportunities in most instances, and missed opportunities where a lot of money has been spent. Huge amounts. Yeah.
And
yet the other way, and you talked about the Thing game, which people like, but there have been, and there are actually quite regularly decent video games made out of films. And it seems that the other way, it's a much easier transition.
Yeah, it is. It's the requirements for a movie are different than a video game. But video games are a series of tasks you have to complete, and you keep growing. And movies are very different. The structure is different. The plumbing in the movie is different, and they just don't seem to. They don't seem to jive. I'd love to give a shot at. Listen, guys, just let me do Dead Space. I can make a great movie.
There's the gauntlet thrown down.
I can do it. I can make a great movie out of that, and we'll scare you silly.
Well, I think there may be an opportunity. You never know. But in terms of your own time and consumption, when you're not, composing music, etc., do you? I mean, you said it. I think it was a quote saying that was it basketball and games?
That's it.
They're your two biggest passions in life outside your family, etc.
That's correct. You got it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
Sorry, no, please.
Well, it's just I decided years ago, I'm going to take it easy. I've really worked hard. So I'm going to do what makes me feel good. Watching basketball, playing video games, and living here in the Hollywood Hills with my beautiful wife. What else can I ask for?
Clippers or Lakers?
Actually, I have to be honest. Neither one. I'm a Golden State Warriors fan.
Oh, are you really?
Stephen Curry. Brilliant player. One of the best. Anyway.
Yeah. Sorry, that's just a little aside. I was just trying to establish what your basketball predictions were. But and does that mean in that context that video games have eclipsed your watching and consumption and love of movies in that context?
In a sense, I do watch movies, but not as much and not as many. I'm a little bit. I pick and choose a little bit more. Video games, I'll try almost anything. Almost anything.
And you said obviously you'd like to make a film of Dead Space. You could make a great movie of Dead Space. But if somebody gave you the opportunity and said, well, you could make a new movie, or actually a game studio said, look, we want you to help write and design a John Carpenter game, which can either be based on the legacy of your past work or something completely new. If you got those two offers, which would you do?
Boy. That's really tricky. I don't know. Why did you ask me a question like that? That's terrible.
What did the answer?
Nice. I don't know. That I don't know. They would be fun. Both would be really fulfilling and fun to do.
And why you said about video games that they're task orientated, etc., and they are. But why do you think it is? And and I presume you're aware of this. Obviously, one of your legendary characters, played by Kurt Russell, Snake Plissken, has been embodied in other people's video games. There's clear references, not just you appearing in a version of the thing, but there are lots and lots and lots of tonal, thematic. Really, you cast an. I mean, I've read articles about it. The unconscious influence of John Carpenter on video games. What do you think it is about your own work that? And we're going to hear from some games people, but what do you think it is of your own work that triggers that kind of homage, that interest, that desire to take? Do you think it's because you've created particularly distinct worlds that they want to steal from?
I have no clue. I'll go with what you just said. I like that. That's good. I'll steal with exactly what you said and repeat it. but it does. I do find it fascinating that we talk a lot, and we've talked in the past about filmmakers being influenced. Your own early massive influence of Hawks on your work. But what's interesting is that sort of leap to like that DNA leap to another medium is what fascinates me. Is that the games makers are looking at your work, watching your movies, and thinking that or that works in my film, and yet your films have got really, really powerful narratives, which aren't. Narrative isn't, as you said, narrative isn't the kind of driving force of most video games. Yeah, it isn't, but. I'm interested in. They made a game and a sequel to the Last of Us and the sequel, and they're pretty. Their journey. It's a journey. Those games are journeys, which it gets down to a narrative, pretty much. But I don't know. I think it's just a different medium. Video games are a brand new art form. They're still growing. Yes. They're still becoming what they're going to be, what they can do well. Movies have been around over 100 years, and the form hasn't changed since Birth of a Nation. It really hasn't. I guess maybe a little bit with Citizen Kane, but it's basically the same form. Repeated over and over again with different actors and directors and stories. But video games are, they combine art and sound and writing a story, and they're really off in a different universe, and they're finding their way now. I think they're discovering themselves, which I think is very exciting.
Well, obviously, from a London Games Festival perspective, we completely agree with you. That's why we're devoting and this event's becoming bigger and bigger. It's becoming a huge dimension of what we're doing now, thanks to the efforts of our director Michael French and his team. But and that's responding to that, not that sort of cultural interest as well as the economic interest. But I want to ask you about your awareness, because what's interesting me is that whilst there's still a massive division between the traditional art form of film and television and games, on a technological level, it's coming together, because obviously virtual film production relies on a game search engine to actually do it. You know, you wouldn't have Star Wars Mandalorian without being able to use that games engine in those LED screens. And I just wondered, does that, because again, you have used all kinds of technology, the latest state of technology in your films in the past. Does the idea of using that technology and that intersection between visual effects, games, virtual production, is that of interest to you? Does it intrigue you?
It's a tool. All these things are tools that you can use to enhance and make storytelling or game playing better. That's what they are. But then in and of themselves, they're not that big a deal. It's simply tools. And nowadays, very expensive tools. Boy, the amounts of money they're spending on games and movies is astonishing.
But it's interesting. You're right about the games. I mean, somebody said, and we'll talk about it a bit more later, about the way in which obviously games are constantly on that cutting, that new edge. Whereas you could argue that whilst film is using technology in different ways, essentially it's still telling a certain set of stories without really much movement. Whereas games, there's something new and evolving kind of happening every minute.
It's true, but I don't know whether it would work. I just don't know, because I haven't thought it through, whether if you suddenly went into a movie theater, hopefully we'll all get back to that point again in our life, and sat down with a controller and move the character in the movie. I don't know if that would work. It would be like sitting at home doing it on your television.
Yeah.
So I don't know how I don't know. I don't know. Thankfully, I don't have to figure that out.
But I think, you know, what we're hearing is that John Carpenter, if he was offered the opportunity to do a movie that was an adaptation of a game, would certainly think about it and do it if you like the game. And John Carpenter would, if he was offered the opportunity to buy a video game company to come in and be a big creative presence, you would consider that. Yeah, you would. Well,
I would hopefully be compensated, Adrian, for that.
Adequately compensated, John. I think. I don't think we're talking about freebies here. Right?
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure.
No. I think the games industry can afford to pay for your services in that context. At least I hope they'll be able to.
They're so much bigger than movies now. The gaming industry is so much bigger. Yeah, and a lot of executives in Hollywood don't realize it.
Yeah.
I think if they have a meeting with a game developer, the game developer is somehow but it's not true. It's reversed.
Yeah.
I love it. Sorry.
I'm now what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pause from my questions for a minute, and I'm going to bring in some special guests, essentially. And we've got some figures of the games industry who are really big fans of yours, and they've all been asked to pose you a question or two. So I'm going to start actually with, you were talking about a particular video game. I'm going to start with Glenn Schofield from Striking Distance, who has a particular question to ask you, touching on one or two things. So let's bring in Glenn.
All right.
Hi, John. My name is Glenn Schofield, and I'm the creator and director of Dead Space. These days, I am working on another sci-fi horror game called The Callisto Protocol, which takes place about 300 years in the future on Jupiter's dead moon of Callisto. Over the years, I've been watching all your movies. I've seen them all probably many, many times, and they've had a great influence on an impact on my games and my career, I want to say. Most notably on Dead Space, we watched a lot of The Thing. And The Thing was just, the first time I ever saw it, I remember seeing it in the theaters, I was thinking, I have never seen anything like this. I've never seen any monsters that came out like this. The way they morphed was just crazy. So My question to you is, what was the genesis of those monsters? What were the ideas? How did you get to that part? Because they've never been seen before. And I want to thank you for it. We had a monster in Dead Space that was just like one in yours. It was an homage where the head falls off and walks off the screen. Well, we had a walking head in Dead Space, and so I wanted to thank you for that.
Glenn, thank you very much. You're very kind. You asked about the monster in the thing. The idea originally, the thing was written so you really wouldn't see the monster very much. It was, I don't know. I think The Bad and the Beautiful, this movie from the old days, kind of set the standards. Well, you don't show those things. You keep them in the dark. This young makeup effects guy, Rob Bottin, came along and said, look, if you can put this under a light and make it change and move, we've got a monster that no one's ever seen. So that's what we did. And those things are all sculpted and figured out ahead of time, and it is a pain in the ass to do that. Anyway, I won't talk about that.
But I think for some of our younger games viewers, the other thing is they probably think, that was all done by VFX in a computer.
No.
You didn't have VFX in a computer when you made the thing.
No. It was all live, right in front of you. We did it all live, and using every motion picture trick we could. But we didn't have a computer. And again, Glenn, if you're listening, I loved Dead Space. I even loved the very last Dead Space, the one in the snow. I loved it. So there you go.
I think Glenn will be watching, so I think Glenn should give you a call. Okay, well, let's now go to our second question. This is from Luke Alvarez, Hero Capital. So, welcome.
Hi, John. It's a pleasure and an honor to sort of meet you today. I'm Luke Alvarez. I'm the founding partner of Hero Capital. We're a games venture capitalist fund. We invest in video games and games technology. And we're massive gamers and sci-fi fans and tech nerds in Hero. And we as a team, and me personally, are also big John Carpenter fans. Your movies are an incredible combination of very deep characterization, amazing, rollicking sci-fi and horror and thriller entertainment, and profound philosophical and metaphysical and existential themes. And it's that combination of different levels and types of cultural mashed up that is particularly remarkable about your work. I have two questions, two straightforward questions. The first is jocular. The second is a bit more serious. Question one: Among Us, one of the biggest games hits of 2020, launched a couple of years previous, but blew up in 2020 and finished the year with about 500 million users. Question is, are you getting royalties on Among Us? It's an amazing game. Seems to me strongly inspired by the plot of The Thing, a fantastic movie in its own right. And then question two, somewhat more serious, is why aren't there more video games of John Carpenter movies? We're curious about that. Love to talk to you if you're interested in exploring that, but really inspired by your canon of work over many years and its contribution to the culture that we all live in. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Luke.
That's great. The first question, well, the second question. Let's go to that. Let me go to your second question, which is most of my movies are owned by studios, and they would love to have you spend money and develop a video game, but they would want to be cut in, and they would want to cut me out. but I want you to come to me, Glenn, Luke. Please come to me. And that first question, your company's, the second word in your company's capital. Well, why don't you right now pay me for Among Us? I'd be glad to accept that from you. And thank you in advance. I don't know Among Us. I'm not familiar with that. Is it an online game? See, now this is one thing I have to differentiate. I don't play online games, really. I play console games, PlayStation and Xbox. So I haven't yet been introduced to the joys of online games, and I would love to. And maybe Luke could introduce me by paying me a bunch of money to play. No, I'm kidding.
And is that because your family aren't playing these games either, and they are only playing console games?
Well, that's the thing. See, I wouldn't get. I'm afraid of online games because any 5-year-old can kick my ass in a game. I don't want to be embarrassed, so I play a lonely man and his console. That's my approach.
And it is an online game, yes. So, okay, well, I think we've already got 2 invitations that people wanted to work with you. So we'll be kind of, doing this dating introduction post this interview for you, John.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you.
So my third guest is Barney Pratt from Supermassive Games, and he's got a couple of questions for you. So please welcome Barney.
Hello there. This is my question for John Carpenter. It's actually 2 questions together. I hope that's okay. John Carpenter, nice to virtually meet you. My name is Barney Pratt. I am an audio director at Supermassive Games, making narrative horror games under the Dark Pictures Anthology banner, which of course I'd highly recommend you play if you haven't already. So here are my 2 questions. Firstly, there is a Sheffield-based abstract techno band that claimed to have soundtracked an unreleased John Carpenter film called Stealth Bomber, starring Kurt Russell. So would it be possible to either validate or deny the existence of Stealth Bomber, please, because it's been of interest for some time? And secondly, if I can take you back to the Escape from New York soundtrack, where you're using a lot of the early synthesizers, this technology lent itself to certain techniques such as the click track that a number of early synth pioneers spoke about, faster, syncopated and repeated melodic phrases and percussion, which has been used for millennia within shamanism and tribal drumming to create a heightened sense of consciousness. And I'm just wondering whether you could share with us a view on how this kind of syncopated rhythms and repeated melodic phrasing help create a heightened state of consciousness in your viewers and a greater emotional engagement in your films. Thanks very much.
Wow. So 2 questions. Stealth Bomber, yes or no?
Stealth Bomber? Really? No. I've never heard of it.
I haven't either. And I thought I knew all the films you've made.
Wow.
So this would be a great
secret,
John.
Was the movie good? I'll take credit for it.
If you've forgotten it didn't happen.
We didn't make it. No.
That's a shame, but not a surprise. And the second question, very musical, very spiritual question about synthesizers, the soundtrack of Escape from New York. What's your response to that? Were you conscious of what the impact of the synthesizer and that soundtrack was going to have in terms of atmosphere on your audiences?
Well, I'm not quite sure about the question exactly. He wants to know about the rhythms that we used, and are they tribal rhythms that can get the audience in a heightened state of no, we didn't think of that. No, we didn't think of that. The only heightened state maybe was when we took a little marijuana to do the music. We were in a heightened state.
But you obviously were an early adopter in terms of musical technology in that sense. Is that something, that generally, because, using a synthesizer, you saw the potential quite early on?
Oh, yeah. I love synthesizers. And their potential is unlimited. They're still growing, just like the gaming industry. Synthesizers are growing and growing, and getting better and better, and the sounds are getting better. And, some of the arpeggiation that you can do on a synthesizer is amazing. It makes you want to dance. It makes you feel good. It makes you high. But yeah, I kind of agree. Maybe all this it makes you high, I guess.
Okay, well, you've answered this question more or less affirmatively. Okay, so on that note, let's go to video question number 4 from Sam Barlow, who's actually a games writer and director. So he wants to talk to you about the creative side of things. So let's bring Sam in.
Hi, Mr. Carpenter. Sam Barlow here. I'm a game director and writer, and a big fan of yours. I've taken a lot of inspiration from how you reinvigorated the horror genre and some of the tricks you've used in terms of perspective and the way you've kind of treated your protagonists. Question I have for you, I wondered if you could talk about longevity and whether you ever think about that when creating a film or a piece of music. Obviously, as a game developer, I'm creating things which often have a very short shelf life, tied to a piece of hardware or a piece of technology. So it's something that I kind of think about a lot. But yeah, I'd love to hear you talk about that and whether that's part of what goes through your mind when you're creating a new piece.
Well, that's a great question. Longevity. Well, in the case of a movie, it's the technology is going to be around. We may have shot some movies in 35 millimeter, but they can be adapted to digital and projected and shown. So, and it's a trick. You have to make movies, I don't know how to put it, for the horizon. So out there. Make a movie out there. Don't make a movie for something that's very small and limited or current. Don't be current. Don't think about what else is going on in the culture. Make a movie that looks way down the road, and that way you'll maintain longevity. I think you can do it with a game, but I don't know. I really don't know. Like there's some games that have completely disappeared because the way you play them is disappeared.
Yeah, no, that's obsolescence. Yeah,
I'm thinking of a game specifically I love to play. I think I can remember it now, but it just doesn't exist anymore. We tried to find it. It'll take me a minute to think about it because I'm old. I need time.
But yeah, I mean, it's interesting about the obsolescence of games, and that they, obviously there are long running games, but when you compare it, because we're still in an industry which is very much in its youth, when you think about the fact that, your first movie, 40, years, and that's, but going back to which I watched again the other day and laughed and enjoyed enormously. But yes, that legacy, the longevity of film is kind of proven. It's still there. And we're still learning about, I guess, legacy in games and what will happen in the future because of that obsolescence that's been in the past. But interesting question.
Now, Adrian, I do remember the game Marble Blast Ultra. That game you cannot find.
Yeah,
it's gone. Anybody has a copy of that, please send it to me now.
That's another request. We'll pass that on down the line. And we have actually here in London a number of places. The Museum of London, for example, is collecting examples of games.
Wow, that's great.
Building up a collection in order to preserve them for posterity, precisely because of those issues. But anyway, let's go on and go to our last video question. Which is from an old friend of the festival, used to work on the festival, and is now a games writer working in the UK. I'd like to welcome Ros Turpin to ask you a question.
Hi, John. Thanks for being so much of an inspiration for so many games makers. not only with the vivid aesthetic of the worlds you've created, but also the tense and thrilling narratives that characterize your work. I wanted to know how effective you think video games are as a medium for visceral and emotional storytelling, and what tips you have for games writers who are struggling with their script.
Wow,
there you go, John.
Question. Great question. Well, video games can be the most visceral and engaging and engrossing art form there is, because you're putting the viewer right into it. And I think the secret is you've got to get the game player to project into the main character. He's got to invest emotionally. We can do that in movies in a variety of ways, and you've got to do it in games too. But the minute I am walking down that dark valley and with my and moving and getting terrified, you have got me. You have got me where you want me, and you're going to scare me. I know you're going to something's going to happen. I'm going to get attacked. I'm going to get upset, and it's just the greatest that you have built into a video game. So I'm jealous of what you guys could do. Really jealous.
And what about the second part of Roz's question? In terms of, because there is now, there's an industry of people writing for video games, and there is also, there is that move for writers to write for video games and other mediums. What do you have advice for anybody that's struggling with their game scripts?
Wow. Well, see, I worked with Steve Niles on a game, the Fear 3 game.
Yes,
we dealt with dialogue mainly, and he and I. So, oh boy. Well,
and that was a positive experience? That was a positive experience?
Yes, very, very. Is it a matter, I'm not sure, Roz, is it a matter of inspiration or a matter of figuring something out? Any writing is painful. Writing is horrifying, horrible. Whoever invented writing is awful, should be killed, or should be, it's because it's never perfect, and you just have to work on it. And just establish the rules of your world and spend the same amount of time establishing the rules of your character. And if you want the game player to be involved, he has to connect with the character emotionally. It's an emotional connection. It's not intellectual. You can't just tell somebody, but they have to feel it. And once they feel it, you've got them.
I think that's very good advice. Thank you, John. I mean, we're coming towards the end of our time, but I wanted to ask you in terms of, we've talked about, I've got a little checklist I'm going to repeat of the things we're going to be doing with you, after this. But I just wanted to ask you, in terms of the future, as you said, you've pulled back and you've taken it easy in certain respects. But what are other things are you working on now? I mean, we've talked about the invitation to make a movie of a game. We talked about the invitation to make a game, and there's a bunch of people who've been on this call who are going to be asking me to give them your number on speed dial afterwards. But leaving that aside, you obviously are. There is a family business. You and Sandy, Storm King, your wife and your production partner. What are you looking to do in the future? Are you going to carry on writing more music, and is that going to remain the big focus, or are you looking to do something else creative? I mean, what's your look at the horizon at the moment, John, with the family?
Well, the horizon is bright. I love doing music with my son and godson. I love working on comic books with my wife.
Yeah.
Well, we're developing some TV shows and movies, but I'm open. I am wide open to anything.
And tell us a bit about the comic books, because the comic book, I mean, I think we're going to get Sandy to talk in a minute anyway, but obviously there's a read across between comic books and games. I mean, very clearly, I would have thought there'd be an opportunity there.
There is. And lot of the comic books we do, see, I'm kind of a horror guy and a sci-fi guy, so that fits in with games really well, the subject matter. But the comic, my wife is the star of the comics. I just sit here and say, wow, that's good, darling. And she does all the work and makes all the decisions.
Well, that's a perfect segue, actually, because we actually have a film of Sandy talking about you and talking about her work and the work of Storm King, which we're going to tee up any second. But before we do, I just wanted to say, well, first of all, thank you to our cast of supporting games industry people for bringing such great questions to you and challenging you with stuff about your work and about your passion for games. And it's really fascinating to hear this side of this very different side. I've talked to you a lot about movies and other things, but hearing you talk with such affection, passion, and commitment about games and your feeling for the creative power of games and the future of games I think is very inspiring to our games watching audience. And I've got a little note to self that says, okay, I've got to get these games companies in touch with John to invite him to make a movie about one of their games, invite him to make a game. We got to get some old tech over to him, and we've got to introduce him to console games, away from console games, or to online games. And we've got to have an induction on online games. And I'm sure there's a whole bunch of people with that.
I'm ready, Adrian. You're the greatest, by the way. You're the greatest. I love talking with you.
I love talking with you. It's always such a pleasure. And I only wish that we were able to do this as we've done in the past, actually on a stage in London. But this is the next best thing, and I'm really glad you gave up the time to be a special guest of honor at the London Games Festival. We're incredibly grateful to you. Thank you so much. We are going to stay in touch because we got a whole little action plan here that we're going to take forward with you. No doubt.
All right, man. Take care. I love you.
I love you too, John. Thanks very much. Love from all of us. Thanks from our games team. Thank you, Michael French, Richard Wilcox. And now let's see Sandy.
Coming up.
Wow. If I were to describe John in 3 words, they would be intellectually curious, challenging, and enduring. One of the reasons that the family dynamic works is I'm not trying to be them. I'm not trying to be the director. I'm not trying to be the musician. But I feel like someone who's putting the crossword puzzle together and making it so they can do what they do best. You understand each other. With John and I, we've worked together so much, and there's a trust factor. I know what his priorities are. I know what he's going to want in a project. I pretty much have a grasp on things that are just not going to appeal to him, or a way he's not going to want to work if it's a film or a television show. But I think we've got one that's about to pop. And these things happen in a really weird way. Like literally last Friday evening, the phone rang and it suddenly became a front burner item. And then on Monday, I was getting a call of, how fast can you have, a budget and board laid out? And I'm going, right now? Storm King is the overall production company that we make our movies, television shows, and comic books out of. Well, I'm involved in all of it. Storm King's actually my company. And the comics have come to the forefront kind of accidentally. I focus a lot on them, particularly during the COVID times when there's no production going on. The original comic that we started with was Asylum. That was created by John and myself and Thomas Ian Griffith. That's like an Angels and Demons ongoing story. We also have an ongoing anthology that's once a year of short horror stories with all different writers and artists. That's about a dozen stories, comes out every October. We have John Carpenter's Tales of Science Fiction. And then we've got Night Terrors, which are graphic novels in horror. And we have a new line starting for kids, which is Storm Kids. I realized as parents were coming up and families were coming up to my booth at comic conventions and saying, oh, it's okay for my kids to read your comics. They watch Walking Dead. Kind of going, well, yeah, no, that's not really a great idea. First of all, there's too much violence for them. And secondly, their issues and their fears are different from adults. But I want kids to have great literature, great art, the same way we do for the adults, but handle the fears that they have at an appropriate age level. It's fantastic to have the kids doing music with him. When they go on tour, Dad's guys on the road, they have a grand time together. They don't need me. And then having them scoring things we're doing. It just makes it joyous. I can't think of anything better than being a family in the arts together.